2 weeks ago, I woke up to an oxygen mask and a paramedic saying my twin had already called to warn them I was faking this for attention. The problem was that she called before I even stopped breathing. That is when I realized the pastel-wrapped box on my counter was not a birthday gift, but a setup. To understand why my family wanted me silenced, you have to go back 4 weeks to the day my grandmother collapsed. My name is Zoe Cooper, and I am currently 25 years old. If my family had their way, I would have never made it past the first hour of this milestone. The first thing I registered was not sound, but vibration. A low, rhythmic shuddering that rattled my teeth and vibrated through the thin mattress beneath my back. Then came the lights, strobing bursts of red and white that pierced through my eyelids, forcing them open. Above me, the ceiling of the vehicle was a blur of industrial white metal and hanging tubes, swaying violently as we took a sharp corner. I tried to inhale, and that was when the terror truly set in. My throat felt like it had been packed with wet cement. There was a plastic mask strapped tight over my nose and mouth, hissing oxygen into my lungs. But my body refused to believe it was enough. I thrashed, my hands scrambling for the strap, instinct overriding logic. "Easy, Zoe, keep it on." The voice was calm, masculine, and professional. A hand, firm but gentle, caught my wrist and guided it back down to the stretcher. I blinked, trying to clear the haze of anaphylactic shock from my vision. A paramedic sat beside me. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, with focus in his eyes that I would later learn belonged to a man named Jonah Reeves. He was checking a monitor, his fingers adjusting a dial. But there was something in the way he looked at me that felt wrong. Usually, in a medical emergency, you see urgency or compassion in his eyes. I saw hesitation. I saw doubt. I managed to drag a ragged breath through the constriction in my airway. I needed to tell him what happened. I needed to say peanuts or cross-contamination or bakery error. I needed to make sure they knew how to treat me before my heart stopped again, but before I could force a sound past my swollen tongue. He spoke again. "Your vitals are stabilizing," he said, his voice flat. He glanced at his partner in the driver's seat, then back at me. "We administered the epinephrine. You're going to be fine, but I have to ask, do you have a history of panic attacks?" I frowned, the plastic mask fogging up with my confusion. Panic attacks? My throat had closed shut. My blood pressure had bottomed out. This was a severe allergic reaction, biological and undeniable. I shook my head, a frantic, jerky movement. He sighed, shifting in his seat. He looked uncomfortable, like he was debating whether to say the next part. Finally, he leaned in closer, over the roar of the siren. "Look, the dispatch notes were unusual," he said. "We got a call about you before we even arrived at your apartment. A woman. She said she was your sister. She told the operator that you were spiraling, that you tend to fake medical emergencies when you feel ignored." The world inside the ambulance seemed to stop. Even as the vehicle sped down the highway at 80 miles per hour, my sister, Sienna. "She said it was your birthday," the paramedic continued, watching my face closely for a reaction. "She said you were upset about not being at the party, and that we shouldn't rush because you likely just hyperventilated." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the medication pumping through my veins. It was the chill of absolute crystalline clarity. I stared up at the swaying IV bag, my mind racing backward, trying to reconstruct the timeline of the last 30 minutes. I had been alone in my apartment. I had opened the box, the pastel pink box with the satin ribbon. I had taken one bite of the cupcake. The reaction had been almost instantaneous. The metallic taste, the itching that started in my ears and raced down my neck, the sudden crushing weight on my chest. I had stumbled to the kitchen counter. Knocking over a glass of water, I had clawed at my purse, looking for my emergency injector. But it wasn't there. It wasn't in the side pocket where I had kept it for 3 years. Panic had seized me then. Real panic, primal and terrifying. I had crawled across the floorboards, my vision graying out, and managed to hit the emergency dial on my phone with a shaking finger. That was the sequence. Bite, reaction, collapse, call. So how did Sienna know? If Sienna called 911 before the ambulance arrived, that meant she called while I was still on the floor, or worse, she called before I even took the bite. She wasn't in the apartment. She was across town, at the sprawling, rented estate where our parents were throwing the event of the season for her 25th birthday. She was surrounded by champagne towers and photographers and 200 guests. She couldn't see me. She couldn't hear me choking, unless she knew it was going to happen, unless she was waiting for it. The realization hit me harder than the lack of oxygen. Sienna hadn't called to save me. She had called to sabotage the rescue. She had called to plant a seed of doubt in the minds of the first responders. Don't rush. She's faking. She does this for attention. If this paramedic hadn't been diligent, if he had taken that dispatch note as gospel and driven 5 miles per hour slower, or waited 2 minutes longer to administer the epinephrine, I would be dead. I would be a corpse in the back of a municipal van, and at my funeral, my mother would have wept about my tragic mental health struggles and how I did this to myself. I looked at Jonah, my eyes wide and pleading. I wanted to scream. She tried to kill me, but I couldn't speak. All I could do was lie there, paralyzed by the drugs and the trauma, while the siren wailed on. The humiliation was a physical weight. Even here, half dead, stripped of my dignity, fighting for air, I was being painted as the liar, the difficult one, the twin who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. It was the narrative my mother had written for me since I was 5 years old, and Sienna had perfected it. But this was different. This wasn't just my mother excluding me from a family photo, or my father forgetting to pick me up from soccer practice. This was a tactical strike. I closed my eyes, and the image of the box floated behind my eyelids. It had arrived yesterday, a peace offering, or so I had desperately wanted to believe. The card was written in looping, elegant script. Happy 25th, Zoe. I know things are tense, but we're still sisters. Enjoy the night off. Love, Sienna. It was perfect. It was cruel. It was precise. The box contained 4 gourmet cupcakes from the Whisk and Flour, a bakery I had trusted for years because they were one of the few places in the city with a dedicated, contamination-free kitchen for my specific allergy. I had checked the label. I had seen the logo. I had let my guard down because, deep down, despite 25 years of evidence to the contrary, a stupid, broken part of me still wanted to believe that my twin sister loved me. I had eaten the poison because I was hungry for connection. Now, as the ambulance slowed, turning into the bay of Cedar Ridge Medical Center, the grief began to curdle into something hotter, something sharper. This wasn't about a birthday party. My mother telling me, "Stay home, nobody wants you there," hadn't been an insult. It had been an instruction. They needed me out of the way. They needed me isolated. Why go to these lengths? Why risk a homicide investigation just to get rid of the extra daughter? The answer wasn't jealousy. It wasn't petty high school drama carried over into adulthood. Sienna didn't need to kill me to be the favorite. She already was. She had the looks, the charm, the approval, the social standing. No, you don't kill someone for popularity. You kill them for power. You kill them for security. My mind drifted to the document, the one my mother had been whispering about for weeks, the one she thought I didn't know about. My grandmother, Lillian Hart, was the only person in this family with a spine. And more importantly, the only one with the money, the Cooper lifestyle, the mansion, the cars, Sienna's endless wardrobe, my father's failed business ventures that were magically bailed out. It all came from Grandma Lillian. And Grandma Lillian didn't trust my mother. She tolerated her, but she didn't trust her. If I died tonight, or if I was institutionalized for psychological instability because I faked a suicide attempt on my birthday, the line of succession would change. The obstacles would vanish. A signature that was currently required would become unnecessary. The ambulance doors burst open, letting in the cool night air and the chaotic sounds of the emergency bay. Nurses swarmed. Jonah helped unload the stretcher, his face still etched with that confusing mix of professional duty and lingering suspicion. "We have a 25-year-old female, anaphylaxis, stabilized en route," Jonah called out to the receiving team. "History of possible psychiatric episodes according to family." I wanted to grab his uniform. I wanted to shake him. No, I wanted to scream. Check the box. Check the label. Check the phone logs. But they were already wheeling me away, the fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor flashing overhead like the shutter of a camera, capturing the lowest moment of my life. I was alive. That was the one thing Sienna hadn't calculated. She had bet on my isolation. She had bet on the paramedic taking a coffee break. She had bet on the narrative being stronger than the truth. She was wrong, but as they transferred me to the hospital bed and hooked me up to the monitors that beeped in time with my racing heart, I knew that surviving was only the first step. They would be here soon. My parents, Sienna. They would arrive with tears in their eyes and lies on their tongues, ready to spin this night into another story about poor, unstable Zoe. I stared at the ceiling tile above me, counting the little perforations to keep from screaming. 1, 2, 3, 4. They thought I was the weak one. They thought I was the invisible one, the shadow that faded when the sun went down. 5, 6, 7. They forgot that shadows are the only things that can survive in the dark. I wasn't going to tell them I knew. Not yet. I would let them play their part. I would let Sienna hug me and fake her tears. I would let my mother sigh and look at the doctors with her practiced exhaustion. I would let them think they had won, right up until the moment I burned their entire world to the ground. But to understand why my family wanted me silent, to understand why a grandmother's love became a death sentence and why a twin sister became an assassin, you have to look away from this hospital bed. You have to go back. You have to go back 4 weeks, to a Tuesday afternoon that smelled of old paper and dust, to the screech of a phone ringing in a quiet archive, and to the moment my grandmother collapsed. 4 weeks before the ambulance ride that would change everything. I was sitting in the basement of Brightwell Records and Archive, breathing in the scent of decaying paper and lemon polish. This was my sanctuary. It was a windowless room 3 floors below the street, filled with rows of metal shelving that stretched back into the shadows like the ribcage of a giant beast. Most people found the silence down here unnerving. But to me, it was oxygen. Here, I was not a disappointment. I was not a shadow. I was just an archivist, a keeper of things that people had forgotten, which felt fitting because I often felt like one of those things myself. I was in the middle of digitizing a stack of property deeds from the 1920s. The work was repetitive and dull to the untrained eye, but I loved the rhythm of it. Scan, categorize, file. There was a logic to it that my life outside these walls desperately lacked. In the archive, if something was in the wrong place, you could simply move it. You could fix it. In the Cooper family, if you were in the wrong place, you were simply erased. The phone on my desk rang, a harsh, shrill sound that sliced through the quiet. I stared at it for a second. Nobody called the landline. My supervisor, heavy-footed and loud, usually just shouted from the doorway if he needed me. I picked up the receiver, a sudden knot forming in my stomach. "Brightwell Archives, this is Zoe," I said. "Is this Zoe Cooper?" A woman's voice, professional, but with that tight, clipped edge that people in emergency services develop to keep from screaming. "Yes. This is the intake nurse at Cedar Ridge Medical Center. We have your grandmother, Lillian Hart. She has been admitted to the ICU." The file I was holding slipped from my fingers and hit the linoleum floor with a slap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "What happened?" "She suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke about an hour ago," the nurse said. "She is currently unconscious. You are listed as her primary emergency contact." I did not remember hanging up. I did not remember grabbing my bag or telling my supervisor I was leaving. The next 40 minutes were a blur of highway traffic and the kind of white-hot panic that makes your hands numb on the steering wheel. Lillian Hart was not just a grandmother. In the ecosystem of my family, she was the sun, massive, burning, and the only thing keeping the planets in orbit. But for me, she was the only person who saw me. When I was 10 and cried because Sienna got the lead in the school play and I got the stage crew, Grandma didn't tell me to be happy for my sister. She told me that the people on stage are nothing without the people controlling the lights. She made me feel essential. She made me feel real. Running into the hospital lobby, the smell of antiseptic hit me like a physical blow. It was the smell of bad news. I navigated the corridors to the intensive care unit, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I found her room, I stopped in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. She looked so small. That was the first thing that broke me. Lillian Hart was a woman of stature, always draped in silk scarves and smelling of expensive sandalwood. A woman who could silence a boardroom with a raised eyebrow. Now, she was a small mound under a thin white blanket. Her face was slack, the color of old parchment. A tube was taped to her mouth, breathing for her with a mechanical hiss-click that filled the room. I walked to the bedside, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I took her hand. It was cold and limp, lacking the firm squeeze she always greeted me with. "I am here, Grandma," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I am right here." I sat there for an hour, just watching the monitors trace the jagged lines of her life. I thought about our Sundays. For the last 5 years, every Sunday morning, I went to her estate for tea. Just me, not Sienna, not my mother. We would sit in her sunroom, and she would ask me about my job, about the books I was reading, about my thoughts on the world. She never asked why I wasn't dating a venture capitalist like Sienna was. She never asked why I didn't dress better. She just asked about me. Those 2 hours were the only time in my week where I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. The peace of the room was shattered an hour later by the clicking of high heels on the tile floor. Rapid, aggressive clicking. My mother, Marlene Cooper, swept into the room. She was wearing a tailored black dress that looked suspiciously like something she had bought for a funeral, but decided was versatile enough for a coma. Her hair was perfectly sprayed into place, not a single strand disturbed by the stress of the news. "Oh, Mother!" she gasped, rushing to the other side of the bed. She grabbed Lillian's other hand, pressing it to her cheek. It was a beautiful gesture. It was also completely hollow. I watched her eyes. They weren't looking at Grandma's face. They were darting around the room, assessing the equipment, checking the quality of the room, looking for a doctor to reprimand. "Zoe," she said, acknowledging me without looking at me. "How long have you been here?" "An hour," I said. "You should have called me sooner," she snapped, dropping Grandma's hand to check her Apple Watch. "I had to leave a luncheon. It was incredibly awkward. I called you the second I got off the phone with the nurse. Mom, you didn't answer." She waved a hand dismissively. "Well, I am here now. Where is the doctor? This is unacceptable. No one is telling me anything." 10 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, it was Sienna. My twin sister did not rush. She strolled. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though we were indoors, and holding a venti iced coffee. Her thumb was flying across the screen of her phone. She stopped at the foot of the bed, looked at Grandma, and made a small pouty face, the kind she used for sad Instagram stories. "Is she, going to wake up?" Sienna asked, looking at me. "I don't know." "Sienna?" I said, fighting the urge to snatch the phone out of her hand. "She had a stroke." "God, that is so scary," she said, finally putting the phone in her purse but keeping her hand on it. I was in the middle of a fitting for the birthday shoot. The lighting was finally perfect. And then Mom called. "It is just such bad timing, you know?" She looked at me, expecting agreement, expecting me to validate that her photo shoot was of equal importance to our grandmother's brain hemorrhage. "Yeah," I said quietly, turning back to Grandma. "Terrible timing." Finally, my father, Stuart, drifted in. He looked like he always did, vaguely apologetic and trying to take up as little space as possible. He stood near the door, wringing his hands. He looked at his mother-in-law, then at his wife, then at the floor. He didn't look at me. He never looked at me when Marlene was in the room. It was his way of keeping the peace. If he acknowledged me, Marlene would get jealous or annoyed. So he just pretended I wasn't there. It was a cowardice I had grown used to. But today, with Grandma lying helpless between us, it tasted like bile in my throat. "Is she in pain?" Dad asked softly. "She is in a coma, Stuart," Marlene said sharply. "She isn't feeling anything." The door opened, and a doctor in a white coat stepped in. He looked tired, carrying a clipboard that seemed to weigh 100 pounds. "Family of Lillian Hart?" he asked. "I am her daughter," Marlene said, stepping forward and effectively blocking me from the doctor's line of sight. She squared her shoulders, putting on her concerned matriarch mask. "I need to know exactly what is going on. The communication so far has been abysmal." The doctor ignored the jab. "I am Dr. Evans. Your mother has suffered a severe hemorrhagic event in the left hemisphere. We have relieved the pressure, but the damage is significant. At this point, we are waiting to see if she regains consciousness. But I have to be honest with you. The prognosis is guarded." The room went silent. The gravity of it settled over us. Grandma might never wake up, the woman who had built the family fortune, who owned the house my parents lived in, who paid for Sienna's modeling career and my student loans. She might be gone. I felt tears prick my eyes again. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about her voice. I was thinking about how I would never hear her call me little bird again. Marlene cleared her throat. I looked up, expecting her to ask about treatment options, about rehabilitation, about the chances of survival. "Dr. Evans," my mother said, her voice steady and businesslike. "Regarding her administrative status, we need to be clear on where things stand." The doctor blinked, confused. "I am sorry?" "The paperwork," Marlene said, a hint of impatience creeping in. She was in the process of updating her estate planning and medical directives last week. She mentioned she was meeting with her lawyer. "Do you know if she finalized her paperwork before this happened?" My stomach dropped. It felt like the floor had opened up beneath my chair. There it was. She wasn't asking if her mother was going to live. She was asking if the will had been signed. She was checking to see if the assets were secured. The doctor looked at my mother with a mixture of surprise and poorly hidden disgust. "Madam, I am a neurologist. I treat patients. I do not handle their legal estates." "Well, surely there is a record of who her proxy is," Marlene pressed, undeterred by the doctor's tone. "If she is incapacitated, someone needs to have power of attorney. I assume it defaults to me as the only child. But if she signed something new?" She trailed off, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't worried about the responsibility of making medical decisions. She was worried that Grandma might have changed the locks on the vault before she collapsed. Sienna piped up from the corner, sipping her iced coffee. "Yeah, we need to know who is in charge. We have deposits down for the party venue, and Grandma's accounts cover that. So if they get frozen—" "Sienna," my father hissed. It was the first time he had spoken up, and he looked terrified immediately after doing it. "What?" Sienna shrugged. "It is a valid question. It is in 4 weeks." I looked from my mother to my sister. They were vultures. They were standing over a body that was still warm, still breathing, and they were already fighting over the scraps. "She is still alive," I said. My voice shook, but it was loud enough to cut through the room. Marlene turned to me, her eyes cold and shark-like. "We are being practical. Zoe, someone has to be. We cannot all afford to be emotional wrecks like you." "She is your mother," I said, standing up. My legs were trembling, but I couldn't sit next to them anymore. "She is lying there fighting for her life, and you are worried about party deposits?" "It is my 25th birthday. Zoe," Sienna said, rolling her eyes. "It is a milestone. Grandma would want me to have it." "Grandma is in a coma," I shouted. "Lower your voice," Marlene snapped. "You are embarrassing us." "I am the one embarrassing us?" I laughed. a harsh, jagged sound. You are asking the doctor about her will while she is still bleeding in her brain. Marlene took a step toward me. She was smaller than me, but she had a way of making herself feel 10 feet tall. This is exactly why you cannot handle these situations. Zoe, you are hysterical. You are unstable. Go home. I am not leaving her, I said. You are upsetting the energy in the room, Marlene said. Look at your father. You are making him anxious. I looked at Dad. He was staring at his shoes, studying the scuff marks on the linoleum. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell Marlene to stop. He just stood there, waiting for the storm to pass so he could go back to being invisible. I am staying, I said, sitting back down and gripping Grandma's hand tighter. Marlene sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of suffering. She turned back to the doctor, who was watching this family dynamic with a look of absolute horror. I apologize for my daughter, Marlene said smoothly to him. She has always been difficult. We will handle the legal matters with her attorney. For now, please just keep us updated on her status. She turned her back on me. Sienna pulled out her phone and started typing again, probably texting her friends about how dramatic I was being at the hospital. I sat there, holding the hand of the only person who loved me, and realized with a terrifying clarity that I was completely alone in that room. They weren't just my family. They were a corporation, and Grandma was the CEO who had just been incapacitated, and me? I was the disgruntled employee they were waiting to fire. I looked at Grandma's face, peaceful amidst the chaos. Wake up, I begged silently. Please wake up, because if you don't, there is nothing stopping them. But the monitor just kept beeping, steady, unforgiving, and in the silence between the beeps, I heard my mother whisper to my father, "We need to call the lawyer first thing in the morning. If she didn't sign that amendment, we are safe. But if she did, we have a problem." I didn't know what the amendment was. I didn't know what Grandma had been planning. But I knew one thing. Whatever it was, my mother was terrified of it. And if Marlene Cooper was terrified, she was dangerous. I squeezed Grandma's hand, promising her I would protect her. But as I looked at the three of them, united in their greed, united in their disdain for me, I realized I couldn't even protect myself. 4 weeks later, they would try to kill me. But sitting there in that hospital room, I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the war had started, and I was the only one on the battlefield without a weapon. 3 days after the ambulance took my grandmother away, my mother summoned us to the house. She did not call it a family dinner. She called it a strategy meeting. Entering my parents' home always felt less like visiting family and more like walking onto a film set where I had not been given the script. The foyer was vast, smelling of lilies and expensive floor wax, the kind of sterile cleanliness that suggested no one actually lived there. I walked into the formal living room, my footsteps echoing on the marble, and stopped. The room had been arranged. There was no other word for it. My mother, Marlene, sat in the high-backed velvet wingback chair near the fireplace. It was the throne of the room, positioned so the light from the bay window hit her hair just right, creating a halo of golden authority. Sienna sat to her right on the love seat, legs crossed at the ankle, looking poised and perfect in a cream-colored cashmere sweater. My father, Stuart, was relegated to the ottoman in the corner, his posture slumped, a tumbler of amber liquid already in his hand, even though it was only 2 p.m. There was one empty chair left, a stiff, wooden antique chair pulled out from the dining room, placed directly in the center of the rug. Facing my mother, the witness stand. I sat down, keeping my back straight, refusing to let them see how much my hands were shaking. "Thank you for coming on time. Zoe," my mother began, her tone clipping the air. "We have a great deal to discuss regarding the management of your grandmother's affairs. Doctor, Evans informed me this morning that while Lillian is stable, her consciousness remains elusive." She used the word elusive like Grandma was being purposefully difficult, rather than suffering from a catastrophic brain injury. "We need to establish a clear hierarchy for medical decision-making," Marlene continued. The hospital needs a single point of contact to streamline communication. Too many voices create chaos. I agree, I said quickly, leaning forward. That is why I should do it. The room went deadly silent. Sienna blinked, a slow, exaggerated motion, as if I had just suggested we set the house on fire. Marlene just stared at me, one perfectly groomed eyebrow arching upward. You? Marlene asked. The word was flat, devoid of question, heavy with judgment. Yes, me, I said, my voice gaining strength. I am the only one who knows her current medical history. Mom, I know she takes lisinopril for her blood pressure and atorvastatin for her cholesterol. I know she is allergic to latex and sulfa drugs. I know Dr. Ahmed is her cardiologist and Dr. Lewis is her rheumatologist. I have been taking her to these appointments for 3 years. I looked at Sienna. Do you even know the name of her primary care physician? Sienna didn't flush. She didn't look embarrassed. She just smiled, a small, pitying curve of her lips that made my blood boil. Zoe, my mother cut in, her voice like ice water. This is not a trivia contest. Being a medical proxy is not about knowing the names of pills. It is about management. It is about interfacing with the hospital administration, making high-level decisions, and representing this family with composure. I have composure, I argued. You have anxiety, Marlene corrected. You are emotional. We saw that at the hospital. You shouted at your sister. You caused a scene. I was upset because Grandma was dying and you were talking about money. See, Sienna said softly. She turned to our mother, her voice dripping with faux concern. She is raising her voice again. Mom, I just don't think it is safe for Zoe to be in that high-pressure environment. If the doctors have bad news, she might spiral. We have to think about what is best for Grandma. We need a steady hand. I looked at my twin. Her eyes were clear and vacuous. She didn't care about Grandma's health. She cared about the power of the position. Being the proxy meant controlling access. It meant being the gatekeeper. I am appointing Sienna as the medical proxy, Marlene declared, closing the subject as if she were slamming a book shut. She is stable. She is presentable. When people look at Sienna, they see the future of this family. When they look at you, Zoe, they see complications. Presentable? I choked out the word. She is in a coma. Mom, she needs an advocate, not a model. She needs the family to look strong, Marlene said. Sienna handles pressure. You handle archives. I turned to my father. He was staring into his glass, swirling the liquid around and around. Dad, I said, please, you know I am the one who takes care of her. You know I am the one she talks to. Tell them. Stuart Cooper looked up, for a second, just a split second. I saw the shame in his eyes. He knew. He knew that Grandma trusted me more than anyone. He knew that Sienna hadn't visited the estate in 3 months unless she needed a check signed. He knew that this was wrong. He cleared his throat. My mother shifted in her chair, the velvet fabric rustling, and shot him a glance. It wasn't a glare. It was barely a look at all. It was just a reminder of who signed the checks and who allowed him to live in this house. Your mother thinks it is best. Zoe, he mumbled, looking back down at his drink. Sienna is very capable. Maybe it is better if you just focus on your work. You know how stress affects you. The betrayal was not new, but it still twisted like a knife in my gut. He sacrificed me. He always sacrificed me. It was the price he paid to keep his comfortable life. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. Sienna is the proxy. What else? Marlene smoothed her skirt. The birthday. My heart skipped a beat. Our birthday. We were turning 25 in 2 weeks. Usually. This meant a joint dinner where I was ignored and Sienna was toasted. But this year felt different. Obviously, with Lillian in this condition, we cannot have the grand gala we planned. Marlene said, Of course not, I said, relieved. It would be tasteless. So we are scaling it down, Marlene continued, ignoring me. We are moving the venue to the estate grounds. A garden party, elegant, understated, respectful. Just 200 close friends and business associates. It will be a celebration of life and resilience. A way to show the community that the Hart Cooper legacy is still standing strong despite this tragedy. I stared at her. You are still having a party? With 200 people? While Grandma is in the ICU? It is Sienna's 25th, Marlene said. It is a quarter-century milestone. We cannot just let it pass. We need to maintain appearances. We have investors coming. The senator is coming. And what about me? I asked. The question hung in the air. Marlene picked up a porcelain teacup from the side table. She took a sip, deliberately slow, before setting it back down. The guest list had to be very curated. Zoe, she said, because of the sensitive nature of the situation, we are keeping it to family and key associates only. I am family, I said. Yes, Marlene said. Technically. She looked me in the eyes then, and I saw the absolute void where her maternal instinct should have been. But you are not the kind of family we need right now, she said. You are morose. You dress poorly. You sit in corners and make people uncomfortable. And frankly, with the rumors about your mental state, which, I might add, you fuel with your outbursts, having you there would distract from Sienna. It would distract from the message of strength we are trying to send. She leaned back. Stay home, Zoe. Nobody wants you there. The words hit me with the force of a physical slap. I felt the blood drain from my face. It is my birthday too, I whispered. We are twins. We were born 12 minutes apart. Marlene shrugged, a small, elegant movement of her shoulders. You do not like attention anyway. You always say you prefer to be alone. Consider this my gift to you. A quiet night, no pressure, no eyes on you. It is not a gift, I said, my voice trembling. It is erasure. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Sienna chimed in. I am doing you a favor. You would hate it. Everyone asks what you are doing with your life, and you have to explain that you work in a basement filing papers while I am launching a brand. It is awkward for everyone. Just stay home, order takeout, and watch a movie. You love that stuff. I looked at them, the three of them, a tableau of cruelty masquerading as a family. I stood up. The wooden chair scraped loudly against the floor, a harsh sound that made my father flinch. Is that it? I asked. Am I dismissed? Ensure you send a gift ahead of time, Marlene said, checking her watch. It would look petty if you didn't. I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with a strange, numb steadiness. I walked past the lilies in the foyer, past the portraits on the wall that showed Sienna smiling and me looking down, and out the heavy front door. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could turn the key. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was cold, freezing cold. It was the temperature of realization. They didn't just prefer Sienna. They actively wanted me gone. I was a stain on their picture-perfect life, and they were finally scrubbing me out. I drove back to my apartment. It was small, cluttered with books and smelling of vanilla candles, a stark contrast to the museum I had just left. I locked the door, bolted it, and slid down to the floor. Stay home. Nobody wants you there. I closed my eyes and saw my grandmother's face, not the pale, coma-stricken face in the hospital, but the vibrant, sharp-eyed woman who had held my face in her hands a year ago. They underestimate you, little bird, she had told me. They think you are weak because you are kind, but you are a heart. You have iron in your blood. Same as me. You just haven't had to use it yet. I pushed myself up off the floor. I walked to my bookshelf, to the battered copy of Great Expectations that Grandma had given me for my 16th birthday. I pulled it down. Inside the back cover, taped to the paper, was a small, folded note. She had given it to me 6 months ago, pressing it into my hand with a seriousness that had frightened me at the time. Keep this safe, she had whispered. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell your sister. Just keep it. And if anything happens to me, if I get sick, if I can't speak for myself, If things feel wrong, you open this. I had never opened it. I had been too scared of what it meant. But now, with my mother's voice still echoing in my ears, stay home. Nobody wants you there. I peeled the tape back. The paper was old stationery, thick and creamy. Grandma's handwriting was spidery but firm. My dearest Zoe, if you are reading this, I am unable to protect you myself. For that, I am sorry. The wolves are at the door, and sadly, they are our own kin. Do not trust your mother's tears. Do not trust your sister's smile. They view my legacy as a bank vault, and they view you as the obstacle to the combination. I have taken steps, but I need you to be brave. You must act before they secure the proxy. Call Thomas Keene. He is not just a lawyer. He is the only man in this city who hates your mother as much as he loved my late husband. Tell him the code word is Mockingbird. Fight for yourself, Zoe, because you are the only one worthy of what I am leaving behind. Love, Grandma. I stared at the name, Thomas Keene. I had never heard of him. My mother used a high-powered firm downtown. This was someone from the shadows, someone secret. I looked at the date on the note. It was written 3 years ago. She had known. She had known for years that this day would come. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My mother wanted me to stay home? Fine, I would stay home. But I wouldn't be watching movies. I picked up my phone. I searched for Thomas Keene. The game had changed. They thought they had kicked me off the board, but they didn't realize that Grandma had just handed me the queen. The package arrived on a Thursday afternoon, sitting innocuously on my welcome mat like a trap disguised as a kindness. I had come home early from the archives, my head throbbing from the fluorescent lights and the silent, crushing weight of the previous day's family meeting. The hallway of my apartment building was quiet, smelling faintly of the neighbor's laundry detergent. I was fumbling with my keys, desperate to get inside and lock the world out, when I looked down and saw it. It was a box, not a shipping carton, but a bakery box. It was a soft, blush pink, tied with a heavy satin ribbon in a shade of champagne gold that I recognized immediately. It was the exact color palette of the garden party my mother was currently orchestrating at the estate. I froze, my key half turned in the lock. There was a card tucked under the bow. I crouched down, balancing my work bag on my knee, and pulled the small envelope free. The paper was thick, textured cardstock. On the front, in gold foil, was a simple sienna. I opened it. Zoe, I know Mom was harsh. She is just stressed about Grandma. I wanted you to have a little celebration since you won't be there tomorrow. Enjoy the night off. Happy birthday to us. Love, S. I read it twice. The handwriting was looped and large, using a thick felt-tip pen. It looked like Sienna's writing, but not quite. The S was a little too curled at the top, and the spacing between the words was rigid, lacking the careless, rushing flow she usually had when she deigned to write me a note. But then, I hadn't received a handwritten note from my sister in 3 years. Maybe her handwriting had changed. Maybe she had hired a calligrapher for her invitations and had them write this too. I unlocked my door and carried the box inside, placing it on my kitchen island. The apartment was dim, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds in dusty slats. I stared at the box. For a long time, I didn't touch it. I just stood there, breathing in the silence. My brain was a war zone of conflicting instincts. On one side, the fortified wall of cynicism I had built over 25 years of being the extra daughter. My mother had told me to stay home. She had told me nobody wanted me. Why would Sienna, the golden child who had sat there and watched me be eviscerated, suddenly send me a care package? It didn't make sense. It felt performative. But on the other side, there was hope, and God. Hope is a wretched, parasitic thing. It burrowed into the softest parts of me, whispering that maybe Sienna felt guilty. Maybe, beneath the layers of narcissism and mother-pleasing, she remembered that we had shared a womb. We had shared a crib. There was a time, before she became Sienna the star, and I became Zoe the shadow, when we held hands while we slept. Maybe this box was an olive branch. I reached out and pulled the ribbon. It unspooled with a satisfying silken sound. I lifted the lid. Inside sat 4 cupcakes. They were exquisite. The kind of pastries that look more like art than food. 2 were chocolate with ganache, and 2 were vanilla bean with a towering swirl of buttercream. But what made my heart stutter in my chest was the logo stamped on the greaseproof paper lining the box. The Whisk and Flour. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The Whisk and Flour was a dedicated, nut-free facility. It was the only high-end bakery in the city where I could eat without fear. My allergy to peanuts and tree nuts was not a mild inconvenience. It was a loaded gun. Even cross-contamination, a knife used to cut a pecan pie then used to frost a vanilla cake, could close my throat in minutes. Sienna knew this. She knew this was the only place I trusted. I picked up the box, bringing it closer to the light. The label on the side listed the ingredients: wheat flour, sugar, butter, cocoa powder, vanilla extract, eggs, milk, no warnings, no processed in a facility that handles. It was safe. But as I set the box down, my thumb brushed against the edge of the ingredient label. It felt thick. I looked closer. The sticker was slightly askew. The top right corner peeling up just a fraction of an inch. Beneath it, I could see the white glossy surface of the box. And was that another adhesive residue? I frowned, scratching at the corner with my fingernail. It looked like the label had been applied by hand, perhaps hastily. Stop it, I told myself. You are being paranoid. I pulled my hand away. Bakeries slapped labels on boxes all the time. Maybe the first one had wrinkled. Maybe they had run out of the pre-printed boxes and had to use a generic one and stick a label on it. Why was I looking for a trap? Why couldn't I just accept that my sister had done something nice? I thought about the family meeting. I thought about my father's silence. If I rejected this, if I threw these cupcakes in the trash because of a crooked label, I was exactly what my mother said I was. Difficult, unstable, ungrateful. I closed the box. I would save them for tomorrow. I would wake up on my birthday, alone, and I would have a cupcake. And I would pretend that I had a family who cared enough to send me something sweet. I went to bed early that night, but sleep was thin and restless. I dreamed of archives. I dreamed I was filing papers in a room that was slowly filling with water, and my grandmother was on the other side of a glass wall, mouthing words I couldn't hear. When I woke up, the silence in the apartment was absolute. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I rolled over and checked my phone. No notifications, no texts, no missed calls. I opened the family group chat, a chat I was technically a part of, though I rarely spoke. Nothing. Then I opened Instagram. The silence of my apartment was instantly replaced by the digital roar of Sienna's life. Her story circle was glowing with a gradient of pink and orange. I clicked it. Slide 1. A video of the estate grounds at sunrise. White tents were being erected on the south lawn. Men in black t-shirts were carrying massive floral arrangements of hydrangeas and roses. Caption: The magic begins. 25 quarter century. Slide 2. A selfie of Sienna in a silk robe, holding a mimosa, surrounded by a team of hair and makeup artists. She looked radiant. She looked like a princess preparing for a coronation. Caption: Birthday glam with the dream team. Slide 3. A close-up of the cake. It was a 3-tiered architectural marvel, dripping in gold leaf. On the top tier, in elegant script, it said Sienna, 25. Just Sienna. Not Sienna and Zoe, not the twins, just Sienna. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. It wasn't that I wanted a party. I hated parties. I hated the noise and the small talk. But seeing that cake, seeing that singular number, felt like watching my own obituary being written in fondant. They had successfully amputated me. I tossed the phone onto the duvet and got out of bed. The apartment felt colder than usual. I walked into the kitchen, the hardwood floor chilling my bare feet. The pink box was still sitting on the island. I needed to reclaim this day. I couldn't control the party. I couldn't control the estate. I couldn't control the fact that my mother preferred a coma patient to her conscious daughter, but I could control this moment. I opened a drawer and found a single, half-burned birthday candle left over from a cupcake I had bought myself last year. It was blue and striped. I opened the box. The smell of chocolate wafted up. Rich, sweet, comforting. I took out one of the chocolate cupcakes, peeling back the paper liner. The cake was dark and moist. I stuck the candle into the frosting. I didn't have a lighter, so I used a match from a book I kept by the stove. The flame flared up, smelling of sulfur for a second before settling into a steady orange tear. I stood there in my pajamas, in my silent kitchen, holding the cupcake. "Happy birthday, Zoe," I whispered to the empty room. I didn't make a wish. I didn't think I had any wishes left that had a chance of coming true. I blew out the candle. The thin trail of gray smoke rose and vanished. I pulled the candle out, licked the frosting off the bottom, and took a bite. The first sensation was sweetness, sugar, butter, chocolate. The comfort of it washed over me, a brief respite from the loneliness. But then, less than 5 seconds later, the taste changed. It wasn't a flavor I could describe easily to people who didn't live with the fear of it. It was a sharpness, a metallic, chemical tang that cut through the sugar like a blade. It was a taste that didn't belong in a nut-free kitchen. I stopped chewing. My brain tried to reject the data. It's from whisk and flour. It's safe. It's safe. Then the tingling started. It began on the tip of my tongue, a prickling heat like I had licked a battery. It shot to the roof of my mouth. Then, the back of my throat began to itch. A deep, unreachable itch that signaled the beginning of the cascade. I spit the mouthful into the sink. I turned on the tap, frantically splashing water into my mouth. Rinsing, spitting, rinsing, spitting. No, 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 no. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I looked at the cupcake in my hand. Inside the dark crumb, buried beneath the frosting. I saw it. A tiny, pale fragment. A shard of something that looked like a crushed walnut or a peanut. It wasn't cross-contamination. The cupcake was full of them. My throat gave a sudden, involuntary spasm. It felt like a hand had wrapped around my windpipe and squeezed. My breath hitched. A wheezing sound escaped my lips. A high, thin whistle that terrified me more than any scream. EpiPen. I dropped the cupcake into the sink and spun around. I needed the injector. I needed it now. I ran to my purse, which was hanging on the back of the dining chair. My vision was already starting to swim at the edges. Little black spots dancing in the periphery. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely undo the clasp. I dumped the contents of the bag onto the table. Wallet, keys, lip balm, a handful of receipts, a pen, no yellow tube. I stared at the mess, my brain misfiring. I always kept it in the side pocket. I had checked it yesterday morning. I was meticulous. I was obsessive. It was my lifeline. I swept the items aside, checking the empty lining of the bag. Nothing. The constriction in my throat tightened. I was breathing through a straw now. Every inhale was a battle. My chest felt heavy, like concrete was setting inside my lungs. Bathroom. I thought, maybe I left it in the medicine cabinet. I stumbled toward the bathroom. My legs felt heavy, uncoordinated. I clipped my hip on the corner of the doorway, pain radiating down my leg, but I barely felt it over the roaring in my ears. I tore open the mirror cabinet. Aspirin, vitamins, Band-Aids, no EpiPen. I looked at the shelf where it usually sat as a backup. There was a dust circle where the tube used to be. It wasn't misplaced. It was gone. A wave of cold horror washed over me, chilling me deeper than the lack of oxygen. Someone had been here. Someone had removed them. I gripped the edge of the sink, gasping, my reflection staring back at me. My face was pale, my lips turning a terrifying shade of blue. My eyes were wide with the realization that this wasn't an accident. The odd label, the gift, the missing medication. They didn't just want me to stay home. They wanted me to die at home. I stumbled back into the kitchen, my knees buckling. I hit the floor hard. The room was spinning, the ceiling tilting at impossible angles. I needed to call for help. I needed to survive. I crawled toward where my phone lay on the floor, dragging my body across the hardwood. My lungs were burning, screaming for air that wasn't coming. I reached for the phone, my fingers numb and clumsy. As I tapped the screen to wake it up, a notification popped up, a new post from Sienna. So sad my sister couldn't make it today. Sending her love and light, the phone slipped from my hand as darkness began to close in from the sides of my vision. I wasn't just fighting an allergy anymore. I was fighting a murder weapon made of sugar and flour. I had to dial. I had to wake my fingers up. 9. My vision blurred. 1. I couldn't breathe. 1. I hit the green button and collapsed onto my back, the ceiling fan spinning above me like a slow, indifferent blade, waiting for a voice to answer and save me from the gift my sister had sent with love. The floorboards of my kitchen were cold against my cheek, vibrating slightly with the hum of the refrigerator. That was the only thing I could feel. My body had become a distant, heavy thing, an anchor dragging me down into a dark ocean. The only connection I had left to the surface was the phone clutched in my numb fingers and the voice of the dispatcher buzzing tinny and small against my ear. 911, what is your emergency? I tried to speak, but my throat was a collapsed tunnel. The air I needed was right there, hovering inches above my face, but I could not pull it in. My chest heaved, a useless, silent convulsion. I forced my jaw to work, fighting the paralysis that was creeping up my neck. Anna, Fee. The word broke apart, dissolving into a wet, wheezing gasp. Allergy, ma'am. The dispatcher's voice was sharp, professional. I am having trouble understanding you. Are you reporting an allergic reaction? Yes, I hissed. It took every ounce of energy I had left. 402 West Highland. Okay, I have the location. 402 West Highland Avenue, apartment 4B. I tapped the screen twice with my thumb. Yes, I could not waste breath on the word. Paramedics are on the way, the dispatcher said. Her voice shifted, becoming strangely hesitant. I could hear the click-clack of a keyboard on her end, a mundane sound that felt violently out of place while I was dying. Ma'am, is there anyone there with you? Can you unlock the door? Alone, I choked out. The black spots in my vision were growing, merging into a curtain that threatened to close the show permanently. Okay, stay on the line with me, she said. Do you have an EpiPen available? Gone, I whispered. The horror of that empty drawer flashed through my mind again, sharper than the lack of oxygen. Stolen. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy pause that made the hair on my arms stand up. When the dispatcher spoke again, her tone had changed. It was no longer just urgent. It was confused. It was wary. Ma'am, we need to verify some information, she said. We received a call regarding this address about 20 minutes ago, from a family member. My heart stuttered. A family member? She called? I wheezed. Yes, the dispatcher said. A Miss Sienna Cooper. She identified herself as your sister. She stated that you might call and report a medical emergency. A wave of dizziness hit me that had nothing to do with the lack of oxygen. Sienna had called. Sienna had called 20 minutes ago. I looked at the clock on the stove, the numbers blurring in and out of focus. 20 minutes ago, the box had still been closed. 20 minutes ago, I hadn't even lit the candle. 20 minutes ago, I was perfectly fine. She said. The dispatcher paused, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice, the reluctance to say the words to someone who sounded like they were suffocating. She warned us that you have a history of psychiatric episodes on your birthday. She said you tend to fake severe reactions for attention and that we should treat any call from you as a non-emergency priority. The room spun. I lay there, my face pressed against the hardwood, and a sound tore out of my throat. It was meant to be a laugh, a bitter, incredulous laugh at the sheer architectural brilliance of my sister's cruelty. But because my airway was closing, it came out as a strangled, animal sob. She hadn't just poisoned me. She had inoculated the emergency response system against saving me. She lied, I gasped, the world narrowing down to a pinprick of light. "We have an ambulance en route," the dispatcher said. But she sounded unsure now. She sounded like she was wondering if she was talking to a dying woman or a manipulative actress. "They are 2 minutes out. Just try to stay calm. Hyperventilating will only make it feel worse." Hyperventilating. She believed the narrative. She thought I was a sad, lonely girl having a panic attack on her birthday because she wasn't invited to the party. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to look at my face, to see the hives rising like welts on my skin, to hear the whistle of air trying to squeeze past a blockage the size of a fist, but I couldn't. The darkness was winning. My hand went slack. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the floor. "Ma'am? Zoe? Are you still there?" The voice was tiny now, distant. I stared at the refrigerator. There was a magnet on it, a stupid souvenir magnet from a trip to Maine I took with Grandma 3 years ago. It was a lighthouse. The light. I thought, Grandma, if I died here, on this floor, Sienna won. She got the money, she got the attention, she got to cry at my funeral and say she tried to warn everyone about my mental health. She would wear black silk and look beautiful. And no one would ever know she swapped the labels. The injustice of it burned hotter than the fire in my lungs. I heard sirens. They were faint at first, then louder. A rising wail that usually signaled safety. But today, I didn't know if they were coming to save me or just to scold me. The last thing I heard was the heavy thud of boots in the hallway, the crack of wood as my door was kicked in, and a man's voice shouting something that sounded like, "Clear left! Kitchen!" Then the ocean swallowed me whole. Consciousness returned in jagged shards. First, there was pain, a sharp, stinging sensation in my thigh. Then, sound, the rhythmic, mechanical whoosh hiss of an oxygen tank, the wail of a siren. But from the inside this time, a vibration that rattled my bones. Then, light, too bright, blinding. I gasped, my body arching off the stretcher. The air rushed into my lungs. Cold, sweet, incredible air. It hurt to breathe, my throat feeling raw and bruised. But the blockage was gone. The cement had been chipped away. "Easy. You are okay. I have got you." I blinked, tears streaming down my face from the sheer effort of existing. I was in the back of an ambulance. The metal walls were swaying. Above me, a man was adjusting an IV bag. He looked down, and his eyes locked onto mine. This was not the look of a man who thought I was faking it. He was young, with dark hair swept back and a jawline that was clenched tight with tension. His name tag read J. Reeves. He wasn't looking at me with annoyance. He wasn't rolling his eyes. He was looking at me with the intense, focused scrutiny of someone trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. "My name is Jonah," he said, his voice low and steady over the noise of the road. "You are in an ambulance. We are heading to Cedar Ridge." "You went into anaphylactic shock." He paused, his eyes flicking to the monitor that was beeping out the rhythm of my racing heart. "We gave you 2 doses of epinephrine," he said. "It took 2. You were almost gone. Zoe." I stared at him, my chest heaving. The epinephrine was coursing through my system, making my hands shake uncontrollably. I felt wired, terrified, and exhausted all at once. "My sister," I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "She called." Jonah's expression tightened. He stopped adjusting the IV and sat down on the bench beside me, leaning in close so he wouldn't have to shout. "Yeah," he said. "Dispatch told us. They put a flag on the call. Code 3 reduced response. They told us to approach with caution because the subject, you, had a history of fabricating medical distress." I closed my eyes, shame washing over me. "I know," Jonah said. The certainty in his voice made me open my eyes again. "I know you didn't," he repeated. He gestured to the monitor, Panic attacks don't cause your airway to close completely. Attention-seeking behavior doesn't cause your blood pressure to drop to 60/40. You had massive histamine release. You had hives on your neck before we even got the mask on you. That was real. That was biological. He reached out and adjusted the blanket over my shaking legs. His touch was clinical but kind. "But here's the thing that bothers me," Jonah said softly. "The call from your sister came in at 8:45 in the morning." I watched him, my brain trying to process the numbers through the fog of drugs. "We got the dispatch alert at 9:10, he continued. "That means she called 25 minutes before you dialed 911. He picked up a clipboard from the rack, looking at the scribbled notes. "When we came in, I saw the cupcake on the floor," Jonah said. "One bite taken, the candle was still warm. You must have eaten it right before you collapsed, correct?" I nodded slowly. "So," Jonah said, and his voice dropped an octave, turning into something darker, something like an interrogation. "If you ate the cupcake at 9 o'clock and the reaction started at 9:05, he looked up from the clipboard, his eyes piercing mine. "How did your sister know to call 911 at 8:45 and tell them not to hurry?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. He had seen it. He had done the math. "She couldn't have known," Jonah said, answering his own question. "Not unless she knew what was in that box, and not unless she knew exactly when you were going to eat it." I started to cry, not the hysterical sobbing the dispatcher had expected, but silent. Hot tears that slid down my temples into my hair. It was the relief of being believed, mixed with the absolute terror of the truth being spoken aloud. "She sent them," I whispered. "For my birthday." Jonah looked at me for a long moment. He didn't look away. He didn't tell me I was confused or in shock. He looked like a man who was realizing that he hadn't just responded to a medical emergency. He had walked into a crime scene. "Who is your sister?" he asked. "Sienna Cooper," I said. "The model," Jonah's brow furrowed. "The one on all the billboards downtown?" "Yes." He let out a short, sharp breath. He looked at the cardiac monitor, then back at me. "Listen to me, Zoe," he said, his voice urgent. "When we get to the hospital, your family is going to be there. They are listed as your emergency contacts. They probably got the automated notification when we scanned your ID." I stiffened. The thought of seeing them, seeing Sienna, made my stomach turn. "Don't tell them," I said, grabbing his wrist. My grip was weak, but desperate. "Don't tell them, you know." Jonah looked down at my hand, then back at my face. He understood. He saw the fear in my eyes, and he realized it wasn't fear of dying. It was fear of the people waiting in the waiting room. "I won't," he said. "I will write it up as a standard reaction. I will keep the timeline to myself for now." He paused, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a pair of latex gloves, still in the wrapper, and something else. It was a small plastic evidence bag. Inside it was the wrapper from the cupcake. "I grabbed this off the floor," he said quietly. "Standard procedure to identify the allergen for the ER doctors. But I also looked at the box on the counter." He leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. "The label on the box says whisk and flour. That place is nut-free. I go there with my niece." He held up the baggie. "But this wrapper, the greaseproof paper, it has a faint embossed pattern on the bottom. Whisk and flour uses plain white. This looks like the paper they use at the Golden Crumb on 4th Street. The Golden Crumb." I knew it. It was a bakery famous for their peanut butter swirls. "She swapped them," I whispered. "Someone did," Jonah said. He tucked the baggie back into his pocket. "And whoever did it wanted you to think it was safe." The ambulance began to slow down. We were arriving. The reality of what was about to happen crashed into me. I was about to be wheeled into a room with the people who tried to kill me, and I had to pretend I didn't know. "Zoe," Jonah said, unbuckling his seatbelt as the vehicle came to a stop. "You are not crazy, and you are not safe with them." The back doors flew open. Light and noise flooded in. "Ready?" Jonah asked. I wasn't. I would never be ready. But as they pulled the stretcher out, I looked at Jonah Reeves, the stranger who had done the math, and I realized I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. I was the girl with a witness. Ready? I lied. And then we were moving, rolling fast toward the automatic doors, toward the waiting arms of the monsters who shared my blood. The curtain to my emergency room cubicle was whipped back with the kind of aggressive theatricality that could only signal the arrival of the Cooper family. I was propped up against the pillows, my skin still blotchy and itching, an IV line tethering me to a bag of fluids. I looked terrible. I knew that. My eyes were swollen, my lips were cracked, and I was wearing a hospital gown that smelled of bleach and despair. But my family? They looked like they had just stepped off a runway. Which, to be fair, they essentially had. Sienna led the charge. She was still wearing her party dress, a shimmering, floor-length slip of champagne silk that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless, save for a calculated smudge of mascara beneath her left eye to signify distress. "Zoe!" she gasped, rushing to the side of the bed. She didn't hug me. She grabbed my hand, the one without the IV, and pressed it to her cheek, looking up at the ceiling as if thanking a higher power. "Oh my God, you are alive." I was so terrified. Behind her, my mother, Marlene, entered with the gravitas of a grieving queen. She was not crying. Marlene Cooper did not cry in public. It ruined the foundation. Instead, she wore an expression of tight-lipped, exhausted disappointment. My father trailed behind them, looking at the floor, looking at the monitors, looking anywhere but at me. "We came as soon as the hospital called," Sienna said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing to the two nurses standing in the corner. "I was at the party, and I had this feeling, twin intuition. I just knew something was wrong. That is why I called 911. I just knew you were spiraling." I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She was rewriting history in real time. She was turning her preemptive strike, her attempt to delay the ambulance, into a psychic act of sisterly love. Twin intuition. It was the perfect cover for the timestamp discrepancy. "You called them," I croaked, my voice still rough from the swelling. "You told them I was faking." Sienna's face crumpled into a mask of hurt innocence. She turned to the nurses, her eyes wide. "She is confused," she whispered loudly. "I told them to be careful. Zoe gets overwhelmed on our birthday. I didn't want the sirens to scare her if it was just a panic attack. I was trying to protect her dignity." "Panic attack?" I tried to sit up, but the room spun. My throat closed. "Sienna." I stopped breathing. Marlene stepped forward then, placing a manicured hand on Sienna's shoulder, effectively silencing her while simultaneously taking center stage. She looked at the doctor who had just entered the room, a tired woman with a clipboard who looked like she had no patience for rich people drama. "Doctor," Marlene said, her voice smooth and commanding, "we are so grateful you stabilized her. My daughter has always been fragile. She has a history of somaticizing her emotional distress. We believe she may have induced this reaction." The doctor frowned, glancing at the chart. "Mrs. Cooper, this was a severe anaphylactic reaction to a food allergen. Her IgE levels are through the roof. This wasn't psychosomatic. She ingested a significant amount of peanut protein." "Exactly," Marlene said, nodding as if the doctor had just agreed with her. "She ingested it. Zoe knows she is allergic. She is 25 years old. She is meticulous about her food. If she ate peanuts, she did it on purpose." The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. "You think I tried to kill myself?" I whispered. Marlene looked at me with cold, flat eyes. "I think you were upset about not being invited to the party. I think you wanted us to rush to your side. And look, here we are. You got your birthday wish. Zoe, we are all looking at you." I felt a fresh wave of nausea. It was brilliant. It was evil. But it was brilliant. If I accused them of poisoning me, they would just say I poisoned myself for attention. They had already planted the seed with the dispatcher. And now they were watering it with the doctor. She needs a psychiatric evaluation, Sienna added, wiping a non-existent tear from her cheek. We just want her to get help. Doctor, she has been so unstable since Grandma got sick. We will focus on the physical recovery first, the doctor said stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with the dynamic in the room. She needs rest. I am going to ask you to limit the visitation to 5 minutes. Of course, Marlene said. She looked at me one last time, not with love, but with the appraisal of a handler checking a defective asset. Rest, Zoe. We will handle the bills. We will handle everything. Just stop making scenes. They swept out of the room as quickly as they had arrived, a whirlwind of silk and perfume, leaving me shivering in the cold wake of their performance. My father paused at the door, his hand on the frame. He looked back at me, his eyes wet. For a second, I thought he might speak. I thought he might say, I believe you. But he just shook his head, a small, defeated motion, and followed his wife into the corridor. I lay there for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling tile, listening to the beep of the monitor. I felt hollowed out. They had won. They had almost killed me, and now they were going to lock me away in a mental ward to keep me quiet. The curtain moved again. I flinched, expecting them to come back for an encore. But it was Jonah. The paramedic had changed out of his high-visibility jacket into a dark fleece. He looked tired, rubbing the back of his neck with one hand. In his other hand, he held a plastic bag. Hey, he said softly. Coast clear? They are gone, I said. They went to tell the world I'm crazy. Jonah pulled a stool over to the side of the bed and sat down. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just set the bag on the swinging tray table. Inside was the pink box. I told the ER staff I needed to bring this in for the talk screen, Jonah said. Standard procedure to identify the specific allergen source, but I didn't give it to them yet. I wanted you to see it first. I looked at the box, the beautiful, innocent pink box with the satin ribbon. It looked like a birthday gift. It looked like love. You said the label was weird, I said. Yeah, Jonah said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of blue nitrile gloves. He snapped them on with a sharp sound that made me focus. Look at the corner. He pointed to the label on the side of the box, the whisk and flour. The logo was elegant, a line drawing of a whisk. But Jonah was right. The top right corner was dog-eared, lifting away from the cardboard, and the texture of the sticker was too thick. It sat high on the box, casting a tiny shadow. I have been staring at this for the last hour, Jonah said. Bakeries use industrial adhesive. It doesn't peel like this unless it was stuck on top of something else, something waxy. He looked at me. Do you want to do the honors, or should I? You do it, I whispered. I don't want to touch it. Jonah nodded. He reached out with a pair of tweezers he must have snagged from a supply cart. He clamped the metal tip onto the peeling corner of the whisk and flour label. Okay, he muttered. Here we go. He pulled, slowly. The room went silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. The top label resisted for a fraction of a second, the glue stretching in sticky, white strands, and then it gave way. It peeled back with a tearing sound that felt like it was ripping through my own skin. Underneath, the cardboard wasn't white. There was another label. It was bright yellow and brown. The font was bubbly and cartoonish. The Golden Crumb. I gasped, the sound sucking the air out of the room. The Golden Crumb. I knew them. Everyone with a nut allergy knew them. They were famous for their peanut butter fudge cupcakes. Their kitchen was a hazard zone. I couldn't even walk past their storefront without holding my breath, because the air coming out of the vents was thick with peanut dust. There it is, Jonah said, his voice grim. This isn't cross-contamination. Zoe, this is a swap. He placed the tweezers down and pointed to the yellow label. Someone bought these cupcakes from the Golden Crumb, he said, reconstructing the crime with terrifying precision. They bought a box of pure poison. Then, they got a box, or just a label, from the safe place, whisk and flour. and they pasted the safe label over the dangerous one. He looked up at me. This took time. This took scissors and glue and planning. You don't do this by accident. You don't do this because you are careless. I stared at the box. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a prank. It was a weapon. Sienna, I said. The name tasted like ash. She sent it. The card. The handwriting was weird. She must have had someone else write it, so I wouldn't recognize it if I looked too closely. Or so she could claim she never sent it at all, Jonah said. If you had died, the box would have been thrown away by the cleaning crew, or your mother would have destroyed it. No one would have looked under the label. It would have just been a tragic accident. Poor Zoe ate the wrong thing. I felt a cold rage settling in my chest, replacing the fear. It was a solid, heavy feeling. I need to call the police, I said. Reaching for the call button, Jonah's hand shot out, covering mine. Stop. I looked at him, startled. What? They tried to kill me. I know, Jonah said, his eyes intense. And if you call the police right now, with your mother and sister in the hallway, what happens? They have the money. They have the lawyers. They have the narrative that you are unstable. You accuse them of murder with a sticker on a box? They will say you put the sticker there. They will say you staged it. They will bury you. Zoe. He squeezed my hand hard. You have proof, he said. But it is fragile. You need to be smart. You need to secure this. He took the box and placed it back in the plastic bag. He sealed it tight. I am going to keep this, Jonah said. I have a locker at the station. It is secure. No one can touch it but me. If you keep it here, your mother will find it. If you take it home, they might come for it. Why are you helping me? I asked. You don't even know me. Jonah looked at the bag, then back at me. He looked uncomfortable for a second, shifting his weight. I had a sister, he said quietly. She died 3 years ago, drug overdose. Everyone said it was accidental. I knew it wasn't. Her boyfriend was. Bad news. But I couldn't prove it. I let the evidence slip away because I was too busy grieving. He looked at me with a fierce, burning clarity. I am not letting another sister get erased, he said. Not on my watch. He stood up, tucking the bag under his arm. Don't confront them. Play the victim. Play the confused, sick girl. Let them think they won. If they think they got away with it, they will get sloppy. That is when we catch them. He walked to the door, checked the hallway, and looked back one last time. Rest. Get your strength back. You are going to need it. Then he was gone. I was alone again, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a predator waiting in the tall grass. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My hands were steady now. The epinephrine shakes were gone, replaced by the adrenaline of the hunt. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I had saved 4 weeks ago. The number from the note in the back of Great Expectations. Thomas Keene. My grandmother had said, if anything happens, call him. She hadn't just meant if she died. She meant if the wolves came for me. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. Then, a voice answered. It wasn't a receptionist. It was a man. His voice gravelly and deep, sounding like he had been smoking cigarettes and reading case law for 50 years. Thomas Keene. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sterile hospital air, and let it out slowly. Mr. Keene, I said. My name is Zoe Cooper. I am Lillian Hart's granddaughter. There was a pause, a shifting of papers on the other end. I have been expecting your call. Miss Cooper, he said. Is your grandmother? She is still in a coma, I said. But this isn't about her health. It is about my safety. I looked at the empty space on the tray table where the box had been. The code word is Mockingbird, I said. The line went dead silent. For 5 seconds, I thought he had hung up. Then, Thomas Keene spoke, and his voice was no longer tired. It was sharp. It was the sound of a sword being drawn from a scabbard. Where are you? He asked. Cedar Ridge Hospital, room 304. Do not sign anything, he commanded. Do not speak to your mother. Do not let your sister into that room alone. I am on my way." I hung up the phone and laid it on my chest. I closed my eyes. Let them have their party. Let them have their champagne and their lies. Let Sienna blow out her candles and wish for more power. I had my wish. I had the truth. And pretty soon, I was going to serve it to them on a platter. 2 hours after I hung up the phone with Thomas Keene, I was standing on the sidewalk outside Cedar Ridge Medical Center. The sun was blindingly bright, a harsh, cheerful yellow that felt insulting given the darkness I had just clawed my way out of. I had signed my discharge papers against the mild protest of the attending nurse, who wanted to keep me for observation. I did not have time for observation. I had a war to fight. My car was still at my apartment, so I hailed a cab. The driver was an older man listening to jazz, and the chaotic, improvisational saxophone felt like the perfect soundtrack for my unraveling life. "Where to?" he asked. 1418 Elm Street, I said. The Keene Building? It was not a skyscraper. In a city where my mother only did business in glass towers with marble lobbies and security guards who wore suits that cost more than my rent. Thomas Keene's office was an anomaly. It was a 3-story brick building in a part of town that was respectable but tired. The brass plaque by the door was tarnished, simply reading Thomas Keene, attorney at law. I walked up the creaky wooden stairs to the second floor. The air smelled of old coffee and older paper. When I opened the frosted glass door, I wasn't greeted by a receptionist with a headset. I was greeted by silence and walls lined floor to ceiling with filing cabinets that looked like they had been holding secrets since the 1970s. "Miss Cooper?" a voice rumbled from the back. Thomas Keene emerged from an inner office. He was a bear of a man, wide-shouldered and stooped, with shock-white hair and a face that looked like a crumpled road map. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket, just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and suspenders. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a detective from a noir novel who had seen too much and slept too little. "Mr. Keene," I said. My voice was still raspy. He looked me up and down, his eyes sharp behind thick glasses. He didn't offer me a handshake. He gestured to the open door of his office. "Come in. Sit down. You look like you have gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight." "Just 1 round," I said, walking into his office. "With a cupcake." I sat in a leather chair that was cracked and worn, the stuffing poking out of one armrest. It was the most comfortable chair I had ever sat in. Keene sat behind a massive oak desk that was buried under drifts of paperwork. He moved a stack of manila folders aside and folded his hands, looking at me with an intensity that was unsettling. "I have been trying to reach you," he said. "Since the morning your grandmother was admitted. I called your cell. I called your apartment. I even called the archives where you work." "I didn't get any messages," I said, frowning. "My phone shows no missed calls from you." Keene let out a short, dry laugh. "I suspect your mother has friends at the carrier, or she has access to your account. Blocking a number is child's play for a woman like Marlene Cooper." He leaned forward. "But you called me. You used the code word. That means the contingency has been triggered." "Contingency?" I asked. "Lillian was a smart woman," Keene said. "She knew that her health was the only thing standing between you and your family's predatory nature. She came to me 6 months ago. She was worried. She said she felt pressure. She said Marlene was asking too many questions about the estate, about power of attorney." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope sealed with red wax. It looked archaic, something from another century, but the weight of it was undeniable. "She drafted a new directive," Keene said, "but she was afraid. She knew that if she signed it and filed it publicly, Marlene would find out. Marlene has eyes everywhere. And if Marlene found out she was being cut out of the control loop, Lillian feared retaliation." I felt a chill run down my spine. Grandma had been scared of her own daughter. She had been living in that big house, surrounded by servants and luxury, looking over her shoulder. "So she created a trigger event," Keene continued. "This document, the one that restructures everything, was to remain dormant. It was only to be activated under 2 conditions. Condition 1. Lillian becomes incapacitated. Condition 2. You, Zoe Cooper, become medically compromised. I stared at him. Me? Yes, Keene said. Lillian told me, if I go down, they will come for Zoe. They will try to neutralize her so she cannot challenge the proxy. She was specific. She said if you were hospitalized, institutionalized, or incapacitated within 30 days of her own medical event, I was to assume foul play and activate the protocol immediately. My mouth fell open. My grandmother hadn't just left me a note. She had built a fortress around me, invisible and waiting for the moment I fell. She knew, I whispered. She knew they would hurt me. She hoped she was wrong, Keene said, his voice softening slightly. But Lillian Hart didn't build an empire by hoping. She built it by preparing for the worst. He tapped the wax seal. This document removes your mother from the line of succession entirely regarding the liquid assets and the control of the family trust. It bypasses Sienna. It names you, Zoe, as the sole trustee and the executor of her medical directives. I sat back, stunned. Me, the archivist, the invisible twin. I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. But there is a catch, Keene said, his tone hardening again. Marlene is currently operating under the old assumption. She thinks she has the power. She has the doctors in her pocket. She has the bank managers on speed dial. If I just file this downtown, she will fight it. She will claim Lillian was incompetent when she signed it. She will claim I forged it. She will tie this up in court for 10 years, and by the time it is resolved, she will have drained the accounts. So what do? I asked. We don't file it in the dark, Keene said. We reveal it in the light. Lillian's instructions were very specific about this part too. She wanted the revelation to happen in front of witnesses, credible, third-party witnesses who can attest to the reaction, to the document, to the truth. He looked at me. We need a stage, and we need leverage. I have leverage, I said. I told him everything. I told him about the box. I told him about the label swap that Jonah had discovered. I told him about the call to 911 that Sienna made 25 minutes before I stopped breathing. As I spoke, Keene didn't take notes. He just listened, his face becoming more granite-like with every sentence. When I got to the part about Sienna telling the dispatcher I was faking it, his eyes narrowed into slits. That is attempted murder, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Jonah has the box, I said. He locked it in evidence. He said the glue pattern proves the label was switched. Keene nodded slowly, a look of grim satisfaction crossing his face. Good. Smart man. We have a chain of custody. We have forensic evidence, and we have the timeline from the dispatch logs. He leaned back in his creaky chair, tenting his fingers. Here is the problem. Zoe, if we go to the police right now, your mother will circle the wagons. She will hire the best defense team in the state. She will spin this. She will say Sienna was just confused about the time. She will say you must have swapped the labels yourself to frame your sister. She will use your psychological instability, which she has already planted in the medical record, to discredit you. That is exactly what Jonah said, I replied. He is right, Keene said. The law is about what you can prove, not what you know, and right now, it is your word against the Cooper dynasty. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. We need them to admit it, he said, or at least, we need them to react in a way that proves their guilt. We need to corner them. He turned back to me. Marlene thrives in private. In private, she can bully, she can bribe, she can manipulate, but in public, when her reputation is on the line, she panics, and when people panic, they make mistakes. The hospital, I said, the idea forming in my mind. They are all going to be there. They are practically living in Grandma's room, holding court. Exactly, Keene said. Tomorrow morning, I am going to call a meeting. I will tell Marlene that I need to clarify some minor administrative details regarding the estate. She will assume I am coming to rubber stamp her authority. She will invite the doctors. She might even have family friends there to show off her devotion. She will bring Sienna, I added. Good, Keen said. We want Sienna there. He walked back to the desk and picked up the sealed envelope. I will bring this, and I will bring the other thing Lillian left. The other thing? Keen opened the top drawer of his desk again. He pulled out a standard white business envelope. It was thinner than the document package. On the front, in Grandma's shaky handwriting, it said, "For Marlene." A letter, Keen said. She wrote it the same day she signed the trust. She read it to me. It explains exactly why she did what she did. It details a conversation she overheard between your mother and Sienna a year ago. A conversation about how long it would take for her to die and how they could speed up the process by managing her stress. I felt sick. They had been planning this for a year. The stroke might have been natural, or maybe it wasn't, but their hunger for her death had been there all along. That letter names names, Keen said. It details the cruelty she witnessed. If that letter becomes public record, Marlene's social standing is vaporized. Sienna's career is over. So we use it, I said. We use it all, Keen agreed. But we have to be disciplined. Tonight, you go back to your apartment. You lock the door. You do not let anyone in. You do not answer your phone. If they text you, you do not reply. Let them stew. Let them wonder where you are. Let them wonder if you are broken. They think I am, I said. They saw me in the hospital. They think they won. Perfect, Keen said. Let them sleep well tonight, because tomorrow, we take everything from them. He handed me a card with his personal cell number. If anything happens tonight, anything at all, you call me. I have a private investigator parked outside your building already. His name is Miller. He won't approach you, but he is watching the door. You are not alone. Zoe. I took the card. My hand was steady. Mr. Keen, I said, standing up. My mother told me to stay home because nobody wanted me there. She thought she was erasing me. Keen smiled, a cold, sharp expression that promised retribution. They always forget the quiet ones. Zoe, that is their mistake. Tomorrow, they are going to wish you had stayed invisible. I walked out of his office and back down the creaky stairs. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the street. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt the cold, hard weight of the truth in my pocket. I had the evidence. I had the lawyer. I had the ghost of my grandmother fighting beside me. I went back to my apartment. I saw a gray sedan parked across the street with a man inside reading a newspaper. Miller. I assumed. It was comforting. I went inside. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, watching the streetlights flicker on. I picked up my phone. There were 12 missed texts from Sienna. Are you okay? Mom is really worried. Please just let us know you are safe. Don't do anything stupid. I didn't reply. I just watched the screen glow in the darkness. Don't do anything stupid, she said. It was too late for that. I was about to do the smartest thing I had ever done in my life. I was going to introduce my family to the consequences of their actions. And I was going to do it with an audience. Thomas Keen did not believe in leaving things to chance, while I sat in the dark of my apartment, ignoring the vibrating summons of my phone. He was already assembling the final piece of our arsenal, early the next morning, before the sun had even fully breached the skyline. I found myself back in the leather chair of his office, but this time, we were not alone. Sitting at a sleek, portable workstation set up on the corner of Keen's massive oak desk was a woman who looked like she could dismantle a bank vault with a paperclip. Her name was Erin Klein. She was sharp-angled and intense, wearing a black hoodie and combat boots that contrasted violently with the dusty, old-world vibe of the law office. She didn't look up when I entered. Her fingers were flying across a mechanical keyboard that clicked like automatic fire. Erin is a digital forensics specialist, Keen said, handing me a cup of black coffee. She specializes in fraud, asset recovery, and piercing the corporate veils that people like your mother hide behind. Erin stopped typing and spun her chair around. Her eyes were gray and assessing. Thomas says you are the target of a sophisticated domestic surveillance and poisoning attempt. That is a hell of a Tuesday. It was a Wednesday, I said, my voice flat. But yes, we need digital corroboration, Aaron said, cutting straight to the chase. Jonah's physical evidence is good. Great, actually. But physical evidence can be argued away. Oh, the bakery must have made a mistake. Oh, Zoe must be confused. We need intent. We need communication. We need to see inside their heads. She gestured to the laptop screen. Thomas tells me your mother is a control freak. Does she handle the family accounts digitally? She handles everything, I said. She doesn't trust assistants with the real business. Does she have a cloud account? A shared family drive? Anything where devices sync? I paused, my mind racing back through years of digital exclusion. I was never part of the important email chains. I was never CC'd on the estate planning. But then I remembered something from 5 years ago, a Christmas morning. My mother had gifted everyone new tablets and insisted we all log into a shared Cooper family account so she could upload the holiday portraits instantly. There's an iCloud account, I said slowly. Cooper Family Share. She set it up years ago for photos. She wanted to make sure she could curate what we posted on social media. If we took a photo, it went to the cloud, and she approved it. Aaron's eyebrows shot up. Control freak is an understatement. Do you have the password? I hesitated. I haven't used it in years. I got my own ID the second I moved out, but I thought about Marlene Cooper. I thought about her resistance to change. I thought about her absolute, unshakable belief that she was untouchable. Marlene didn't change passwords because she didn't believe anyone would dare try to hack her. In her mind, security was for people who had something to fear. Try Cooper Legacy, I said. Capital C, capital L, the number 1 at the end. Erin turned back to the screen. She opened a specialized browser window that she explained would log every keystroke and server response for evidentiary purposes. Okay, Erin said. Entering ID, entering password. She hit enter. The screen buffered for a second. My heart hammered against my ribs. If she had changed it, if she had locked me out. We were blind. Then, the little wheel stopped spinning. A dashboard populated. Photos, notes, calendars, and message archives. We are in, Erin said, her voice devoid of emotion. And wow, she syncs everything. Text messages, iMessage, WhatsApp. It is all backing up to the main repository. She probably doesn't even know it works that way, I said. A bitter smile touching my lips. She thinks the cloud is just a magic photo album. She doesn't realize it is a mirror. Let's see what she has been reflecting, Erin said. She started filtering the data. She typed in keywords: Zoe, birthday, box, whisk, bakery. The screen filled with hits. Jackpot, Erin whispered. She clicked on a message thread dated 2 days ago. It was between a contact labeled Sienna New and Mother. I leaned in, the glow of the screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the office air. Sienna. Picked up the package from Golden Crumb. The girl at the counter asked if it was for a party. I said yes. A retirement party for a nuisance, Marlene. Do not be clever. Just get the other box. Whisk and Flour closes at 5. Sienna. Got it. The labels peel off pretty easily if you use a hairdryer. Swapping them tonight, I felt the air leave my lungs. There it was, in black and white. No metaphor, no ambiguity. Retirement party for a nuisance. Scroll down, Keen commanded, his voice rumbling from behind me. Erin scrolled. The timestamp moved to yesterday morning. My birthday. Sienna. Package delivered. I put it on the mat. No one saw me. Marlene. Good. Now we wait. Did you check the feed? Sienna. Watching now. She's just walking around. God, she looks depressing. She is just staring at the box. I froze. The feed? I whispered. What feed? Erin clicked on an attachment in the thread. It opened a grainy video file. It was a view of my hallway, my apartment hallway. The angle was high and steep. Looking down from the ceiling, I saw myself, pixelated and small, walking out of my door to pick up the pink box. "That is the maintenance vent," I said, my skin crawling with a violation so deep it made me nauseous. "There is a vent right above my door." "They tapped a camera into it," Aaron said, analyzing the metadata. "Or they bribed the super to give them access to a security install. They weren't just guessing. Zoe, they were watching you live." We kept reading. The horror deepened with every line. Sienna, 8:42 a.m. She is opening it. She is lighting a candle. Pathetic. Sienna, 8:44 a.m. She is eating it. Taking a bite now, Marlene. Call them. Do it now. Use the script we practiced. Sienna, dialing. I will tell them she is manic. That will slow them down. I turned away from the screen, pressing a hand to my mouth. I thought I had processed the betrayal in the ambulance. I thought I knew how much they hated me. But this? The script we practiced? This was a military operation. They had sat down, perhaps over tea, and rehearsed how to let me die. "They watched me choke," I whispered. "They watched me crawl across the floor and they didn't call for help. They called to stop the help." "This is premeditated attempted murder," Keene said, his voice hard as iron, and with the video file linked to the text thread. "We have them on surveillance fraud, too." "There is more," Aaron said. She wasn't looking at the texts anymore. She had opened a folder labeled legal/medical. "Look at this thread from 4 weeks ago," she said. "Right after your grandmother's stroke, Marlene. Doctor, Evans is becoming a problem. He keeps asking if Lillian has had moments of lucidity. I told him no." Sienna, "Did she?" Marlene, "She squeezed my hand when I mentioned the estate. She knows what is happening. We need to move fast. If she wakes up before the proxy is signed, we lose the liquid assets." Sienna, "Just forge it. Mom, you have her signature on a dozen checks. Trace it." Marlene, "Too risky with the new notary laws. We need to pressure Evans to declare her permanently incompetent. Then I can activate the old power of attorney. We need to make sure Zoe doesn't interfere. She is the only one Evans talks to." Sienna, "I will handle Zoe. Her birthday is coming up. We can solve the Zoe problem permanently." I stared at the screen. The Zoe problem. That was all I was to them. A glitch in the spreadsheet, a snag in the fabric of their inheritance. "Aaron," Keene said, "can you export this? All of it? The video? The timestamps? The metadata? The device IDs? I need a package that is bulletproof." "I am already doing it," Aaron said. Her fingers were a blur. "I am hashing the files now. This creates a digital fingerprint that proves the data hasn't been altered since extraction. It will stand up in any court in the country. Even if they delete the account 5 minutes from now, we have the forensic image." Keene turned to me. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "We have them. Zoe, we have them cold." "So we go to the police," I said. "Right now, we show them this video." "We could," Keene said, "and the police would arrest them, eventually, but arrests take time. Bail would be posted. Marlene would be out in 4 hours, spinning a story about how her account was hacked, about how this is a deepfake. She has the money to muddy the waters for years." He walked around the desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms. "You want justice, Zoe? Or do you want a settlement?" "I want them to lose," I said. "I want them to lose everything they thought they were stealing." "Then we execute the plan," Keene said. "The police are the hammer. But first, we need the anvil." He looked at his watch. "It is 9 o'clock. Marlene is holding court at Cedar Ridge right now. She has invited Dr. Evans, the hospital administrator, and 2 of Lillian's oldest friends to the room. She is planning to make a difficult announcement about moving Lillian to a hospice facility." "She is trying to move her?" I asked. Alarmed. "Grandma isn't ready for hospice." "Exactly," Keene said. "Marlene wants her out of the hospital, away from the doctors who ask questions, and into a private facility where she can control the access. She is going to sign the papers today at 10 o'clock. He picked up his briefcase. It was battered leather, scarred from 1,000 battles. "We are going to interrupt that meeting." I stood up. My legs felt steady. The fear that had paralyzed me for 25 years was gone, burned away by the glowing text on Aaron's screen. "Aaron," I said, "print it. Print the texts. Print the timestamps. Blow up the frame of the video where I'm opening the box." "On it," Aaron said. The printer in the corner whirred to life. Keen looked at me. "You ready to be the bad guy, Zoe? Because in their story, that is what you are. You are the disruption." "I don't want to be the bad guy," I said. Taking the stack of warm paper from the printer tray, I looked at the grainy image of myself, unsuspecting and alone in my hallway. "I want to be the executioner." Keen smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Then let's go. Your grandmother is waiting." We left the office, stepping out into the bright, indifferent morning. The city was bustling, people drinking coffee and rushing to jobs, completely unaware that in a quiet hospital room on the north side, a dynasty was about to crumble. I clutched the file folder against my chest. Inside was the transcript of my murder, retirement party for a nuisance. I got into the back seat of Keen's car. "To Cedar Ridge," Keen told the driver. As we drove, I watched the city roll by. I thought about the maintenance camera. I wondered how long it had been there. Had they watched me sleep? Had they watched me cry? Had they watched me reading books and drinking tea, laughing at their own cleverness? It didn't matter now. They had watched me for years, but they had never really seen me. They saw a victim. They saw a target. They never saw the bomb sitting in the center of the room, ticking down to zero. "Mr. Keen?" I asked as we merged onto the highway. "Yes, Zoe?" "When we walk in there," I said, "don't let me interrupt them. Let them finish their speech. I want them to feel safe. I want them to think they have won right up until the second I put this paper on the table." Keen nodded. "A strategic ambush. I like it." "We will wait for the signature moment." He looked out the window. "Lillian would be proud of you," he said. "She always said you had the quiet kind of strength, the kind that endures." "I am done enduring," I said. The hospital came into view, a glass monolith rising from the trees. It was time to go to the party, and this time I was bringing the gift. The elevator ride up to the third floor of Cedar Ridge Medical Center was the longest 45 seconds of my life. Thomas Keen stood beside me, silent and imposing, a granite statue in a wrinkled suit. He held his briefcase like a weapon. I held the manila folder containing the forensic export Aaron Klein had just printed. It was warm against my chest, a physical heat that matched the cold fury burning in my stomach. When the elevator doors slid open, the air changed. The quiet hum of the hospital corridor was disrupted by the distinct, performative murmur of a gathering. We walked toward room 304. The door was open. The room was full. My mother had staged this perfectly. Grandma Lillian lay in the bed, motionless, the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator the only honest sound in the room. Around her, the vultures had gathered. Marlene stood at the head of the bed, one hand resting possessively on the pillow, the grieving daughter in her final act. Sienna was seated in the armchair, dabbing her eyes with a tissue that looked suspiciously dry. My father, Stuart, stood by the window, looking like a man awaiting a firing squad. But there were others. Dr. Evans was there, looking harried and uncomfortable. Two of Grandma's oldest friends, Mrs. Higgins and Mrs. Vance, women who controlled half the charity boards in the city, were seated on the visitor bench, clutching their pearls and looking appropriately somber. And there was a man in a sharp blue suit I recognized as the hospital administrator. Marlene was mid-speech. "It is the hardest decision a child has to make," she was saying, her voice trembling with practiced perfection. "But we must think of her dignity. The doctors say there is no quality of life here. Moving her to the serene environment of the palliative care wing at St. Jude's is what she would want. She valued peace above all else." She picked up a pen from the bedside table. The administrator held out a clipboard. "As Sienna is the medical proxy, she agrees, and as her daughter, I am signing the transfer order," Marlene said, lowering the pen to the paper. "Do not sign that paper. Marlene," the voice boomed from the doorway. deep and resonant, cutting through the saccharine atmosphere like a chainsaw. Every head in the room snapped toward us. Marlene's hand froze inches above the clipboard. She looked up, annoyance flashing in her eyes before she smoothed it into confusion. "Thomas?" she said. "Mr. Keene? We are in the middle of a private family moment. This is hardly the time for legal billing." Thomas Keene stepped into the room. He didn't ask for permission. He walked to the foot of the bed, placing his briefcase on the rolling table with a heavy thud that made Mrs. Higgins jump. "I am not here for billing," Keene said. "I am here representing my client, Lillian Hart." "Lillian is in a coma," Sienna snapped, standing up. "She doesn't have clients right now. She has family. She has an attorney," Keene corrected, his eyes hard behind his glasses. "And she has a voice she entrusted to me." "This is ridiculous," Marlene said, straightening her spine and glaring at me. "And why did you bring Zoe? She was discharged yesterday. She is unstable. Look at her. She is shaking." I wasn't shaking. I was vibrating with the energy of the kill. I stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Keene. "I am not shaking, Mother," I said. "I am waiting." "Waiting for what?" Marlene scoffed. "For attention? We are handling serious matters here. Doctor, Evans, please ask them to leave so I can sign the transfer." "Doctor." Evans looked from Marlene to Keene. Clearly sensing that the power dynamic in the room was shifting, he didn't move. Keene opened his briefcase. The click of the latches was loud in the sudden silence. He pulled out the wax-sealed envelope. "You are operating under a power of attorney dated 4 years ago," Keene announced to the room. "That document is null and void." Marlene laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "Excuse me? I am her only child." "And this," Keene said, holding up the document, "is the Living Trust Amendment and Emergency Directive that Lillian Hart signed 6 months ago. It contains a specific activation clause. It states that in the event of her incapacitation, followed by any medical compromise of her granddaughter Zoe Cooper, the estate enters immediate lockdown." Marlene's face went pale. "Medical compromise? What are you talking about?" "I am talking about the anaphylactic shock Zoe suffered yesterday," Keene said. "An event Lillian predicted. She feared that if she fell ill, you would try to eliminate the only person who stood in your way." "That is insane," Sienna cried out. "Zoe had an allergic reaction because she is careless. Grandma didn't predict that. You are twisting things." "The document is clear," Keene continued. Ignoring her, he began to read. "Effective immediately, all decision-making power regarding my medical care and the administration of the Hart estate is transferred to the sole trustee." He looked up, his gaze landing squarely on my mother. "That trustee is not you, Marlene, and it is certainly not Sienna." He pointed at me. "It is Zoe Cooper." The room erupted. Mrs. Higgins gasped loudly. My father dropped the cup of water he had been holding. It splashed onto his shoes, but he didn't seem to notice. "Her," Marlene shrieked, the mask slipping completely. "She is a filing clerk. She has no experience. She is mentally fragile. This is undue influence. You manipulated an old woman. Thomas, I will have you disbarred." "Lillian was sound of mind," Keene roared, silencing her. "And just in case you tried to claim otherwise, she left a letter of intent." He pulled out the white envelope. "For Marlene. She wrote this after she overheard a conversation in her sunroom last July," Keene said. "A conversation between you and Sienna." Marlene stopped breathing. I saw the recognition in her eyes. She remembered the day. She remembered thinking Grandma was asleep in the chair. Keene opened the letter. "I heard you," he read. "I heard you tell Sienna that I was taking too long to die. I heard you joke about how much simpler the tax implications would be if I passed before the fiscal year ended. I realized then that I was not raising a daughter. I was raising a vulture." Marlene grabbed the bed rail, her knuckles white. "That is a lie. She imagined it. She was old. She was confused. She was terrified," I said, speaking for the first time since we entered. I walked to the table and placed my own folder down next to Keen's. She knew you would come for me, I said. And she was right. Oh, stop it, Sienna spat, walking toward me. God, you are so dramatic. You had an allergy attack. Zoe, stop acting like it is a conspiracy. You are just jealous because I am the proxy and you are nothing. You are trying to steal the spotlight on my birthday week. It isn't a conspiracy. Sienna, I said, my voice steady and cold. It is forensics. I opened the folder. Yesterday, Jonah Reeves, the paramedic who saved my life, found something interesting on the box of cupcakes you sent me. Sienna froze. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then back to my face. I didn't send you anything. She lied instantly. I told you I was too busy. Who? Really? I picked up the photo of the box. Because here's a picture of the box with the label from Whisk and Flour. And here's a picture of what was underneath that label when we peeled it back. The golden crumb. The room went deadly quiet. Even the hospital administrator leaned in. You bought poison, I said, and you disguised it as a gift. You are lying, Sienna stammered, her face flushing red. You put that there. You are framing me. Am I? I asked. Did I also frame the text messages? I pulled out the transcript Aaron had printed. I held it up for Mrs. Higgins and Mrs. Vance to see. The font was large and damning. Date, February 2nd, I read aloud. Sender, Sienna. Recipient, Mother. Message, picked up the package from Golden Crumb. The girl at the counter asked if it was for a party. I said yes, a retirement party for a nuisance. Sienna made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked at our mother, panic wild in her eyes. Mom, stop her! Marlene stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing. She couldn't stop it. The paper trail was too long. And the best part, I continued, turning the page, the 911 call. I looked at Dr. Evans. Doctor, you treated me. You know that time is critical in anaphylaxis, right? Absolutely, Doctor, Evans said, his voice grave. My sister called 911 at 8:45 in the morning, I said. She told them I was faking. She told them to take their time. I held up the log from the cloud account. But according to the video feed you installed in my hallway, which we also have. By the way, I didn't take a bite of that cupcake until 9 o'clock. I stepped closer to Sienna. She shrank back, hitting the wall. How did you know I needed an ambulance 15 minutes before I was poisoned? Sienna? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Unless, I whispered, you knew exactly what was going to happen because you planned it. Sienna looked around the room. She saw the horror on Mrs. Higgins's face. She saw the disgust in Dr. Evans's eyes. She saw the way the hospital administrator was slowly backing away from the transfer paperwork. She crumbled. I was just... She looked at Marlene. Mom told me to. She said we needed to handle you. She said you were going to ruin the estate. Sienna, Marlene shrieked, lunging at her. Shut your mouth. She did, Sienna screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining the perfect makeup. She said Grandma was going to leave it all to you if we didn't do something. She made me buy the cupcakes. It was her idea. You ungrateful little brat, Marlene hissed. I did everything for you. Stop it. The shout came from the window. We all turned. My father, Stuart, was standing there. He was trembling. His face was wet with tears, and for the first time in 20 years, he was standing up straight. Stuart, control your daughter, Marlene commanded, trying to regain the upper hand. No, Dad said. He walked over to the table and looked at the transcripts. He looked at the photo of the maintenance camera. He looked at me. I knew you were hard on her, he whispered to Marlene. I knew you didn't love her like you loved Sienna, but I didn't think you were monsters. We did it for the family. Stuart, Marlene argued, for us. Do you like this lifestyle? Do you like the club? Who do you think pays for it? Her. She pointed at the coma patient. And she was going to cut us off. So you tried to kill our daughter? Dad asked, his voice breaking. She is fine. Marlene waved a hand at me. Look at her. She is standing right there. She is just dramatic. She is alive because she fought, Thomas Keene said, not because you showed mercy. The room was a wreckage of ruined reputations. The friends on the bench were texting furiously, likely spreading the scandal to every socialite in the city before the hour was up. The doctor was on the phone with security. Sienna was sobbing in the corner, a puddle of silk and shame. Marlene was standing by the bed, breathing hard, her eyes darting around like a trapped rat, looking for an exit, a lawyer, a lie that would work. Get out, I said. Marlene looked at me. Excuse me? Get out of this room, I said. You are not the proxy. I am, and as the person responsible for Lillian Hart, I am banning you from the premises. You can't do that, Marlene spat. I am her daughter, and I am her protector, I said. Security is on the way. You can walk out, or you can be dragged out. Marlene straightened her jacket. She looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. You think you have won. Zoe, you have nothing. You are a lonely, bitter girl who… Beep, 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 beep. The sound cut her off. It wasn't the steady rhythm of the last 4 weeks. It was faster, erratic. The heart rate is spiking, doctor, Evans said, rushing to the monitors. Blood pressure is rising. We all froze. I looked at the bed. Grandma's hand, the one Marlene had been resting her claw on just moments ago, twitched. It wasn't a spasm. It was a movement. Her fingers curled into a fist. Then, a sound came from the ventilator, a choke, a fight against the tube. She is fighting the vent, doctor, Evans shouted. She is waking up. The room went dead quiet, save for the frantic beeping of the machines. Marlene's face turned the color of ash. Sienna stopped crying and stared, terrified. Grandma's eyelids fluttered, once, twice, then they opened. They weren't unfocused. They weren't glassy. They were blue, sharp, and aware. She looked at the ceiling. She blinked. Then, slowly, painfully, she turned her head. She didn't look at the doctor. She didn't look at me. She looked directly at Marlene. And in that gaze, there was no confusion. There was no love. There was only judgment. Marlene took a step back, hitting the rolling table. "Mother?" she whispered. Grandma stared at her, and even with the tube in her throat, even with her body broken and weak, the look she gave her daughter was loud enough to shatter glass. It was the look of a CEO firing an embezzler. It was the look of a matriarch disowning a traitor. The machine beeped faster, matching the rising panic in the room. Grandma had returned, and she had heard everything. The room was suspended in a terrifying electric silence. The only sound was the harsh, rhythmic rasp of my grandmother's breathing as she fought against the ventilator tube. Her eyes were open, and they were fixed on Marlene with a clarity that cut through the medical haze like a laser. "Doctor." Evans moved with practiced urgency. He checked the monitors, then leaned over the bed. "Lillian," he said, his voice loud and clear. "Can you hear me? Squeeze my hand." Her hand, thin and bruised with IV ports, tightened around his fingers. It was weak, but it was deliberate. "Okay, doctor," Evans said. "You are breathing over the vent. We are going to take the tube out. I need you to cough for me on 3. Marlene took a step forward, her hands fluttering nervously. "Doctor, is this safe? She just woke up. Maybe we should wait. We should sedate her until she is more stable." "She is awake." "Marlene," I said, my voice cutting through her panic. "And she wants to speak. Doctor." Evans ignored my mother. 1, 2, 3. The procedure was wet and ugly, a moment of raw biological struggle that stripped away all the dignity Marlene tried so hard to curate. Grandma gagged, coughed, and then drew in a ragged, gasping breath of room air. Her chest heaved, her face flushed. Marlene rushed to the bedside, grabbing a cup of ice chips. "Oh, Mother, here, let me help you. You are okay. I am here. She tried to press a spoon of ice to Grandma's lips, performing the role of the saintly daughter for the audience of horrified witnesses. Grandma turned her head away, refusing the spoon. She swallowed hard, her throat clicking dryly. She took a breath, rattling in her chest, and looked up at the woman who had spent the last 4 weeks planning her funeral. "Get away," Grandma rasped. The voice was barely a whisper, sounding like sandpaper on stone, but in that quiet room, it sounded like a gavel strike. Marlene froze, the spoon hovering in midair. She forced a tight, trembling smile. "Mother, you are confused. You have been asleep. I have been taking care of you. We all have." "I was not asleep," Grandma wheezed, each word a battle. "I was listening." She shifted her gaze to the foot of the bed, where Thomas Keene stood with the file. She nodded at him, a microscopic movement, but enough. "Thomas," she whispered. "I am here, Lillian," Keene said, stepping closer. "And so is Zoe." Grandma's eyes found me. The hardness in them melted instantly, replaced by a profound, tearful relief. She lifted her hand an inch off the mattress. I took it. It was cold, but it was the most alive thing I had ever felt. "You kept the note," she whispered. "I kept it," I said, tears spilling down my face. "I called him." Grandma closed her eyes for a second, gathering strength, then opened them and looked at Sienna. My sister was pressed against the wall, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. The golden child aura had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified 25-year-old girl who realized her safety net had just been set on fire. "Sienna," Grandma said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. "Grandma, Sienna started to sob, her hands shaking. "Mom made me. I didn't want to. She said you were suffering." "Stop," Grandma commanded. The word was short, sharp. "You are not a victim." She took a ragged breath. "You have her rot?" She looked at Marlene. "I watched you. I heard you. Cruelty is not inheritance." Marlene's face crumpled. The facade finally broke. "I did it for this family, for the legacy. You were going to give it all to this nobody." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She doesn't know how to be a Cooper. She would have ruined us." Thomas Keene cleared his throat. The sound was heavy with finality. "Actually, Marlene," he said, opening the leather folio on the table. "That is the other matter we need to discuss, the activation clause." Marlene whipped her head around. "What?" "The trust structure Lillian set up 6 months ago was dormant," Keene explained, his voice calm and professional. "It was designed to trigger only upon 2 conditions. First, proof of malicious intent against the beneficiary. Second, the confirmation of the grantor's capacity." He looked at Dr. Evans. "Doctor, would you say the patient is conscious and oriented?" "She is fully oriented," Dr. Evans said, writing it down on the chart. "She is cognizant." "Then the trigger is pulled," Keene said. "As of this moment, 10:17 in the morning, the Hart Family Trust is irrevocably transferred to the sole trusteeship of Zoe Cooper. The accounts are frozen, the real estate is locked, the credit cards in your purse. Marlene? They were deactivated 3 minutes ago when my paralegal filed the physician's affidavit." Marlene grabbed her purse, digging frantically for her phone, checking her banking app. I watched her face as the screen loaded. I saw the moment the red text appeared. "Account suspended. Contact administrator." She looked up, her eyes wide with a terror that was absolute. "You can't do this. We have bills. We have the mortgage. The party." "The party is canceled," I said. My father, Stuart, stepped away from the window. He walked to the center of the room. He looked at his wife, then at his mother-in-law, and finally at me. "Stuart, do something!" Marlene screamed at him. "Call the firm! Fix this!" Dad shook his head. "I can't fix it. Marlene, it is broken. It has been broken for 20 years. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't look through me. He looked at me. "I knew," he said softly. "I didn't know about the poison, I swear, Zoe. But I knew they treated you like a ghost, and I let them, because it was easier than fighting her." He gestured to Marlene. "I bought my peace with your silence," he said, his voice cracking. "And it almost cost me your life." "I don't want your apology, Dad," I said. "I want the truth." "The truth is," he said, looking at his wife, "I am done keeping the peace." He walked over to the door and opened it wide. 2 uniformed police officers were standing in the hallway. "Waiting, Doctor." Evans had called them the moment I showed the text transcripts. "Officers," my father said. "My wife and daughter have some questions to answer," Marlene screamed. It was a primal, ugly sound. She lunged for the door, but the officers were faster. They stepped in, their expressions grim. "Marlene Cooper?" one officer asked. "We have a report of attempted homicide and conspiracy. We need you to come with us." "This is a mistake," Marlene yelled as they took her arms. "I am Marlene Cooper. You work for me. I pay your salary." Sienna didn't scream. She just slid down the wall to the floor, burying her face in her hands, sobbing about her followers, about her brand, about how this wasn't fair because it was her birthday. I watched them go. I watched my mother being handcuffed in her Chanel suit. I watched my sister being led away, her silk dress trailing on the hospital linoleum. I felt nothing, no joy, no triumph, just the quiet, heavy relief of a burden finally being set down. I turned back to the bed. Grandma was watching me. She looked tired, her skin pale, but she was smiling. "Happy birthday, little bird," she whispered. I took her hand and kissed it. "Happy birthday, Grandma?" The fallout was not swift. It was a landslide. The police investigation moved with the mechanical precision Thomas Keene had promised. The forensic package Aaron Klein assembled was bulletproof. The video of the hallway, the text threads, the peeling label on the box. It was too much for even the best defense lawyers to dismantle. Marlene's bail was set at $5 million. She couldn't pay it. Her assets were frozen by the very trust she had tried to steal. Sienna's fall was faster and much more public. The story leaked. Of course it did. The friends in the hospital room had phones, and gossip travels faster than light in high society. The golden child attempted murder, the nut-free setup. I didn't have to say a word. The internet did the work for me. Within 48 hours, Sienna lost her agency contract. The billboard downtown, the one where she looked like a goddess towering over the city, was painted over. Her social media, once a shrine of adoration, became a graveyard of angry comments. People don't like liars, but they really hate sisters who try to kill their twins. She lost the perfect twin brand because you cannot be perfect when your mugshot is trending on Twitter. My father moved out of the estate. He got a small apartment downtown. He sent me letters. I didn't open them. Not yet. Maybe one day. But not today. Forgiveness is a bridge, and he had burned his side down. He would have to learn to swim if he wanted to reach me. As for me, I didn't take the mansion. I sold it. I sold the cars. I sold the furniture that Marlene had loved more than her children. I bought a small house near the rehabilitation center where Grandma was recovering. It has a big window, a garden for growing herbs, and a kitchen where I bake things that are safe. I still work at the archives. I like the quiet. I like the order. But now, when I go home, I don't feel invisible. 3 weeks later, I was sitting on my porch, drinking tea and reading a book to Grandma, who was sitting in her wheelchair, enjoying the sun. She was regaining her speech, day by day. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from a new number. "Hey Z, it's Sienna. Look, I know things are messy. Mom is crazy. right? I have nowhere to go. The press is camped outside the apartment. Can I come over? Just for a night? We are sisters. We are twins. That has to mean something. I read it twice. That has to mean something. It did. It meant that she shared my DNA, but she did not share my heart. It meant she was desperate, and she thought I was still the weak one. She thought I was still the girl who would accept crumbs of affection because I was starving. But I wasn't hungry anymore. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the urge to explain or to argue. I opened the contact settings. I pressed block caller. Then, I opened my email and forwarded the screenshot to Thomas Keene. File the protective order, I typed. Permanent. I put the phone down and looked at Grandma. She raised an eyebrow. Everything, okay? She asked. I smiled, and for the first time in 25 years, it was a smile that reached all the way to my eyes. Yes, I said. Everything is quiet. We sat there in the sun, two survivors in a garden that belonged only to us. The final victory wasn't seeing them in handcuffs. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the revenge. It was the silence, the beautiful, safe, permanent silence where no one was watching, no one was plotting, and I was finally, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the Monica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people.